Fleming, I'm here. Mr. Brunetto is absent with cause. First item on the agenda is the public hearing, Clark Road subdivision, preliminary plan, major subdivision with road creation, Plat V, Lot 27. We're at preliminary stage. A number of years ago, it was passed at master plan, and following that, there was some denials, recommended denials by the planning board relative to certain lots in the road for certain zoning relief, which the zoning board subsequently overturned our recommendations and approved them. So now we're back here a number of years later with those variances granted by the zoning board, and we're at preliminary stage. And Mr. Resnick, is that you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Michael Resnick on behalf of the applicant and owner. Michael Resnick.
So you want to go ahead, Mr. Resnick, present what you want?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I am aware, I believe when this was previously before you on master plan, there are some new members. So if the board would indulge me, I am going to give a little bit of background so everyone understands the genesis of this development, where it's been and where we are now. Again, Michael Resnick on behalf of the applicant owner. This is Plat 5, Lot 27. The project site is approximately 20.5 acres of wooded land. And as far as a zoning designation, this is an R80. Per your comp plan, at the time of the submittal, the future land use designation for this area is residential, moderate to low density. The proposed subdivision at master plan was not in conformance with your zoning ordinance. Certain relief was required by the zoning board, in particular special use permits. That was just referenced by the chairman. I understand that there was a unfavorable report and recommendation from this board. However, the zoning board saw fit to grant that relief. And so at this time, we are in conformance with your zoning ordinance based on the relief that was provided by the zoning board. I will also inform you that by way of your master plan decision, there were certain waivers that were provided and voted on in connection with this approval by the zoning board. There are no new waivers that are being requested this evening in connection with the preliminary plan application. We've taken a look at your planner's staff report, which is comprehensive, and quite frankly, we have almost no issues with it at all, save for the fact that I would just note that it does indicate no waivers. That is true as it relates to this preliminary application. However, the waivers that were approved at master are vested rights, and we'll follow this project until final, if we're lucky enough to get a final approval. So generally speaking, just by way of a project description, this is a 5-lot subdivision, 5 individual lots, single-family homes on each lot. The proposed 5-lot residential subdivision also includes approximately 500 feet of roadway, driveways, utilities, and stormwater management structures. Access to the site will be through Clark Road. The minimum lot size proposed is 2.5 acres. This is consistent with the zoning designation as well as the future land use map per your comp plan. Just by way of some background in connection with this preliminary application was actually submitted in its first instance in October of 2020. At that time, your staff identified an issue with the application relative to access to public sewers. And it was the board's purview to request, or staff's purview to request, that we would go to your town council to request waivers and variances in order that these homes could all be linked up to the sewer system. We did go before a subcommittee. I will tell you it took a very long time to get before that subcommittee. In fact, it took 18 months. And ultimately, there was a 1-1 split. That's the way that committee was set up. We went to the town council based on that neutral recommendation, I guess I'll call it, and ultimately your town council determined that they would deny that request for variance. That denial, despite the fact that we didn't disagree with it, disagreed with it at the time, created a situation where we needed to go back to DEM, RIDEM, in order to get approved 5 OWTSs for these 5 lots, and that has been obtained. So if you're questioning some of the reason why it took some time to get back before you, it was really related to that prolonged process with the town council and ultimately needing to go to DEM in order to obtain the on-site waste treatment systems.
Excuse me, Mr. Red, just to clarify, that doesn't approve a specific septic system for each of the lot. It only, correct, that still has to be obtained.
That's correct. I'll let Mr. Cato speak to that in more minutia when he goes to, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chairman. Yep. The one item that I do want to note is that we do have the right to link up to one sewer system for one lot. And we would like to reserve that right at this hearing with respects to either lot 1 or 2. That determination has not been made as to whether we wish to hook up one of these lots to sewer, which is our right. And we would ask that that be something that be a condition to final approval. And just very briefly, the master plan was approved May 8th, 2018. During that hearing, a conservation easement was suggested. A conservation easement was presented to your staff, including your solicitor, in connection with this preliminary application. And it's my understanding that that conservation easement has been approved as to its current form. There were also certain requests relative to the HOA documents. We believe that we've captured those requirements. I'd submit to you that those documents are presently still under the solicitor's review, and I would request that the finalization of those documents be a condition to final as well. I feel confident that we can work that out amongst the attorneys. The special use permit from the zoning board that I had referenced was granted June 8, 2020. It is a valid permit. And the only state permitting that is required that's been obtained is an insignificant alteration permit from RIDEM. I'm joined tonight by Mr. Cato, who's our civil engineer, who's going to be doing his presentation this evening. I also have Mr. Scott Rabideau, who is our wetland scientist. While there's not a particular presentation that Mr. Rabideau has for you this evening, because his scope is really with RIDEM, he's certainly here to answer any questions that you may have relative to those issues. Stormwater management, which is obviously a big topic in this area, will be discussed by Mr. Cato, and I've already discussed the issues with sewer availability. One other comment that we had seen in the staff report was relative to us submitting a fee in lieu for the open space calculation sheet. That is in process. We have requested certain information from the tax assessor. In turn, your planner suggested that we provide him some information that may assist in calculating that number. And again, I would ask that that small item be left as a condition to final administratively so that we can work that out with staff and your tax assessor.
Excuse me, I just have a question. I'm confused on that, Mike. The fee in lieu is relative to what?
For any major subdivision, open space is required,
Right,
or a fee in lieu be paid.
okay.
So we have, this is going to be, these are all going to be private properties. The open space that it shows on the maps is all going to be privately owned, not public.
Oh.
So because of that, they have to calculate the fee in lieu. We've had a little back and forth about this, but the typical approach, similar to the way bonding goes, is that the engineer, in regard to infrastructure, the way the engineer calculates what infrastructure would cost, and then our town engineer reviews it. I had suggested that the applicant have a real estate professional provide us with their proposal of what the land value could be so that our tax assessor can review it, just following on a very similar process.
So the land covered by the conservation easement is specifically private to each of the lots,
Correct.
but this fee in lieu would be because there's no technically any public open space that's designated.
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct, and I don't mean to suggest there's any dispute. We just need to work out exactly what that number would be.
Who determines the amount?
Eventually, it has to be approved by you.
Right.
But as I said, we would have the applicant provide their proposal of what that number is. We would have the town's tax assessor review it for her interpretation of its validity, and then a comment back to you on that matter, so that you could, as a group, validate that.
And a final figure, if it goes to final, would be included in the final?
Yes.
Would be approved?
Yes, it'll be submitted
If the
with
whole
final.
thing's approved? Okay.
Yes. And sorry to be verbose, the only final comment that I would have is we reviewed the staff report. We consider it to be a favorable staff report. We've taken a look at the 7 stipulated conditions relative to preliminary approval, and we have no objection to any of those 7 conditions. And with that, I'd like to call our civil engineer, project engineer, Ben Cato. And prior to Mr. Cato commencing his testimony, I'd just like to ask him a couple brief questions
Sure.
relative to his experience to qualify him.
I do. Benjamin Cato, C-A-I-T-O, registered professional engineer with Millstone Engineering in Warwick.
And Mr. Cato, if I may inquire, if you could just list for the board your accreditations that you hold as a registered engineer in the state of Rhode Island.
I've been a registered professional engineer in Rhode Island for close to 16 years now. I'm also licensed in the state of Connecticut. Worked on projects all over the state and been through before boards such as yourself, zoning, and town councils.
And in connection with the work that you did in this project, and specifically in connection with this preliminary application, did you review applicable Rhode Island general laws?
I have, yes.
And did you review applicable local ordinances, including the zoning ordinance and planning board regulations, and any other local laws applicable to this matter?
Yes.
And did you also review all relevant Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management general laws as well as rules and regulations applicable to this project?
I have.
Excuse me, folks. Stenographer needs to be able to transcribe what you say, so if you can try to speak towards her so she can hear you clearly.
I should know that.
Thank you.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would ask Mr. Cato to be qualified as an expert in civil engineering.
Can I get
Need
a
a motion?
motion?
Move to be accepted as an expert?
Motion by Dr. O'Neill, seconded by Mr. Brady. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Go ahead, Mr. Cato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to rehash everything that's already been stated, so I'm going to kind of pick up my presentation about halfway through, if that's okay.
Fine with me.
I'd like to start with stormwater, and if we may advance the slides to the site plan. Actually, we can use this one. This one's fine that's up there. We can talk. That's fine. This is fine. If actually, either one. Let's go back to the colored ones. I think they pop more. Yeah. That's fine. So this slide shows the flagged wetlands in green, and it has the site plan proposal in background in the black and white. But as mentioned, it's a 5-lot subdivision. One of those lots, lot number 2 on the plan, located in the bottom left corner on the screen, has frontage on Clark Road. The remaining 4 would have frontage on a new cul-de-sac. As mentioned, it's about 500 feet long. It's a 40-foot right-of-way per town ordinance with a 20-foot wide pavement surface. The driveways themselves are of a pervious pavement. They're proposed to be pervious pavement or a paver section, cross-section, so that it treats the water, it holds the water quality volume per Rhode Island DEM standards. So each of the driveways, including the driveway that's off of Clark Road, is a pervious driveway. Consistency. Water quality is collected and treated in a system of swales and bioretention areas alongside the roadways. There's also individual bioretention areas on the lots that handle some runoff from the rooftops and any patios that may be proposed. These are sized in general terms right now for a large house. We know that we would be back before the town, either at the building department level or in front of the board, as the case may be for the individual lots as they come forward for development. There are 3 larger stormwater basins on the property. They're shallow, but they have a large surface area, and those are there for stormwater detention to retain peak flow rates. And I can say that all the storms that were studied, the 1, the 10, the 50, and the 100-year storm, in all of those storm events, the peak flow rates are reduced as a result of the proposed design. Yes.
Mark, can you use the microphone, please?
I didn't want to interrupt, but
That's
I want to
okay.
let you go. So you designed for a 100-year storm?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. On the swills, on the roadways, you've got 2, you said, or 3?
There are swales on either side of the road in
Right.
different locations, yes.
All right. Have you gotten to the point where you decided on oil separation systems and all of that?
So from the current regulations and standards from the Department of Environmental Management, we use what we call sediment forebays.
Yep.
There's also pea-stone trenches that are shown along the roadway to collect the road, right off the roadway, the runoff from the roadway, and those settle out the sediments. And then there's water quality bioretention areas, and that takes care of the pollutants themselves.
Okay. Maintenance on those?
Well, that's a town road. I believe when we last spoke on this, but this is, you're going to forgive me, Mike, this is a long time ago.
Yeah, I
But
wasn't
the
here
town
then.
road, town right-of-way is, the swales are part of the town maintenance, correct?
All right, and
And
you'll review this with the town engineer so that he's happy with those, because if we got to maintain them,
Yeah, I know.
he's going to want to be happy with them, I presume.
so the town engineer has reviewed the plans and has offered some comments that are in the staff report,
Yeah, I saw it.
but there was nothing of concern.
Nothing dramatic. Thank you.
Mike, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, just responding to Ben, in regard to stormwater, I believe maintenance of those detention basins is intended to be conducted by the homeowners association and was referenced in the operation and maintenance plan.
Okay. Do you want to keep going with questions, or should I, you want me to keep going on my side? Okay. So, I'd like to talk about septic systems, because the chairman had a question about that. We do have subdivision suitability from DEM, which means we went out, we did the testing, we've established water tables in the locations of the proposed septic systems. Those were all at 18 inches, which is appropriate for septic systems in the state of Rhode Island. So we're confident that we can move forward with septic designs. Now, those would be completed on an individual lot basis once the lots are developed. The state wants to see each individual system designed for the house that's proposed at the time of development. So the standard for the planning board typically is a subdivision suitability application at this stage, where we have the level of confidence that we can design a system that's approved by the Department of Environmental Management, and then we come back to DEM for the individual septic systems down the road when the houses get built.
Sorry again. On those systems, you're going to be using town water?
That is correct.
Okay. Have you looked at, do you know, is the town water coming in from the same aquifer as the septic systems are going to go refeed? Because my question then becomes, I mean, it's a fluid dynamics, as you know. I mean, if you've got a closed system, you're pulling out of the same source that you're putting back into, it's just cyclical. But if you have an open system where you're bringing water in from someplace else and bringing it in, you need to calculate that, in my opinion, because now you're adding to what we have to admit is a pretty spongy area.
So septic systems are designed and placed with certain setbacks to prevent that circulation issue you were talking about, referring to. Lots smaller than this can be proposed to have a septic system with wells. the septic system needs to be 100 feet away from a well. And I can tell you, I don't know the exact source of, away from a well, a drinking water well. I don't know the source of the water from the town in this location, but I do know it's more than 100 feet away from these systems.
My question isn't the bacterial spoiler. My question is, you've got an inflow of X number of gallons from another source. So you're actually adding to the wetland, the wet environment there. So am I making sense here?
Yeah.
So if I have a closed system and I'm pulling 1,000 gallons out, I assume that the 1,000 gallons is going through my septic systems and going back in again. If I'm bringing 1,000 gallons from the outside, that's a new 1,000 gallons that's coming back through the system. And I'm wondering, are you looking at that, if that's from a different source, aquifer source?
I have not looked at that, no.
Okay. Could you just note that
Sure.
someplace? Thank you.
So I do understand the question. I just wanted to also state that the septic systems are going to be located within their proper setbacks from the wetland and any other critical resource areas per state regulations.
Excuse me, have you decided on the one sewer hookup or not, or is that still pending, whether you want to do that?
So ideally, the one that makes the most sense is either Lot 1 or Lot 2, the closest ones to Clark Road.
Right.
It's has not yet been determined. I think it's going to depend on marketability down the road, which one they want to use, and cost of the systems.
But that's by right, right, Mike? Steve, they have one sewer hookup by right. Council turned down the other lots.
Right, but because the entire lot has frontage on Clark Road.
Yep.
And there is a sewer line in Clark Road, they have the right to get the one sewer permit.
Okay.
That's a by right allowance.
Yep.
And that was specified and described by the town engineer in their memorandum to us.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Kendall.
Sure. So the plan that you see before you is essentially the same plan that was here at master plan. The layouts themselves haven't changed, except for maybe a slight tweak here or there. They're the same 5 lots, they're the same driveway locations, the same wetland encroachments and buffer encroachments as you have seen in the past. I just wanted to remind you, because I know there are some members of the board who have not seen this plan in the past. Lot 1, there's a section of the driveway that encroaches into the wetland buffer, right where the mouse cursor is there. And if you just bear with me, I have that written down. It's about 818 square feet of encroachment there. There was concern from this board in the past about the interconnectivity for the 2 wetlands on either side of the driveway for wildlife. So that dark stripe you see across the driveway there is an amphibious crossing. A crossing for amphibians. So that's something that we have included in our plans. It's been reviewed by the town, and it's also been reviewed and approved in the DEM plan set. So that's
Excuse me,
specified for
Joe's
that.
got a question.
Sure.
That's interesting. They go over it or under it? Is that a
Under.
culvert? Culvert,
Under.
yeah.
So it's essentially a grate with a channel underneath it that has some soil in it at the same elevation on either side as the wetland areas, and so that they can cross right underneath. The second one, I don't know if you have it. Yeah, there we go. So this is for the lot in the back. This is Lot 5. This lot, the driveway crosses an existing stream. And we've placed this proposed crossing at a location where there's an existing historic stone culvert. If you've walked the site, you can walk over that pretty easily. In fact, when we were doing test holes in there, we were able to get an excavator right across that. It's a very strong culvert. So the intent here is we've proposed an arch culvert to cross and bridge this stream. It's wide enough that it extends from both sides of the stream without disturbing the stream bed or the embankment of the stream. And we're going to leave the existing stone culvert in place. So hydraulically and from a habitat standpoint, everything should remain the same as far as flow back and forth between the areas of the wetlands. You can see there's numerous trees planted on there. That's a buffer that was asked of us by DEM. It's just a screening to help with lights and noise and stuff from getting into the wetlands themselves. We also have a small wetland encroachment on Lot 5 further up, and this is what we call a temporary encroachment. So what happens here is this is an underdrain for the bioretention for the house that's up there. The bioretention is going, so the water will filter through the bioretention media, get collected in an underdrain, and needs to exit the facility itself. And due to some grading issues, we wanted to daylight it at an elevation that was low enough, so we elected a location with the least amount of impact to a wetland buffer. And this would be constructed and then allowed to revegetate. So we call it a temporary encroachment. I also wanted to talk about I know Mr. Resnick, Attorney Resnick mentioned it earlier, it's one of the conditions that was or recommendations that was in the planning director's report had to do with street lighting. And so my intent is to work with the town on the location and style of street lights, and at final plan, we will have that as part of our submission. As noted before, we do have numerous approvals in place. We've had the wetland flags validated by DEM. We have an insignificant alteration permit from DEM. We have master plan approval from this board, along with special use permits from the zoning board. We also have the subdivision suitability, as I mentioned, relating to the septic systems from DEM. So I think I summarized everything. I'm sure there are questions, and I'm happy to
So
entertain.
let me just throw a couple things, maybe the staff or maybe you. There's some notation that 2 of the lots, 3 and 4, were reconfigured differently since we approved them at master plan, but there's insignificant changes to that, Mike?
Yes, Ben, please correct me if I'm wrong, but let me just blow this up a little bit. This line right here has been reconfigured between lots 3 and 4, is that correct?
That is correct. As we finalize the subdivision plan, I think it was a frontage issue with Lot 4, so we had to adjust one of the segments of that line.
It changed the areas of each lot by 1,000 square feet or 2,000, but nothing significant.
But that
as I
doesn't
recall.
trigger going back to master plan at all?
No, because the configuration, orientation, the areas available for construction of the houses remains essentially the same. So I did not feel as though that was a significant enough change to require an amendment to the master plan.
Okay, and the other, and I'm sure it's a stupid question, but I'll ask it anyhow. So there was an anticipation or expectation, I would think, that when we were at master plan, that sewers were going to be part of this. So does the presence of septic systems for at least 4 of the lots change anything in terms of the relief or anything that we considered or the zoning board considered prior to this?
No, Narragansett is unlike some of our neighbors that actually have a local septic overlay, as we have had wetland overlay, coastal overlay. We do not have a septic overlay, so there's no real, there's no process at the local level for the town to approve or deny or require any changes to septic layout. The applicant has shown, and this blow-up here shows it, the test holes that they have put in place. That's what these little squares that are colored in black and white are, the test holes in the area of where they anticipate the septic system to be located. And those test holes were acknowledged by Rhode Island DEM's water division in the drafting and the approval of the subdivision suitability report. And that is the level of authorization that we need to have in hand for our process to continue forward.
And DEM would have indicated if that impacted to a significant degree anything we had approved as a town before that?
Yeah, the subdivision suitability report could have
Not come through?
not recognized all 5 lots. It could
Right.
have said lot number 3 is insufficient because the water table is not deep enough, but they didn't say that. They acknowledged all
Okay.
5 as being buildable. So to answer your question, no, there's no change in the way staff has reviewed it or in any level of relief that the town needs to grant.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Joe?
Yeah, well, when we talked about this a few years ago, there was some problem with bringing the water into all 5 lots, and I think that's mentioned here. There may be a well required. I think it was Lot 2, wasn't it?
So yes, there was a well proposed for Lot 2. The reason for that, if you recall, was that there are 2 water districts in
Yeah.
Clark Road, and they end on either end of our site.
Yeah.
But what we were able to do with the assistance of the town engineer is we were able to get 5 water services from the same water district from the north. And so all 5 lots will be serviced by town water.
They will?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing I would ask you about, and maybe you've touched on it, I missed it, is the maintenance of the culvert and the other variances that you have here in terms of flow and movement. Is that part of the homeowners association agreement, or how does that work?
There's a stormwater management plan that's been approved by RIDEM. It's incorporated into the HOA document. It would be the homeowners association members to ensure that maintenance is done as contained in that report. To the extent that there's an issue and members of the association don't follow through in that regard, there's a mechanism which is normal course for the town to be able to lien the property.
Is that where the biennial word comes in?
I mean, Joe, she can't hear you.
Yeah, I was just asking my colleague here, isn't there a word somewhere in there, biennial, which,
Biannual.
not biannual, or what, how,
The inspection of the conservation easement specifies biannual inspection.
Correct. I believe that the conservation easement and those obligations are a little bit more draconian than the stormwater management. My recollection is that the stormwater management systems are once a year.
Once
but
a year, and that's state specified, I would imagine, right? Whereas the inspection of the conservation area is specific to this neighborhood.
Yeah, because essentially the swale management or whatever is DEM regulated, where we kind of, not negotiated. The conservation easement is more put, with the conditions were put on it, master plan, allowing the town to go in and
Yep.
and enforce those conservation easements. So that's kind of the difference in the rate of inspections.
And that inspection's twice a year of the conservation area, but only once a year for the,
They're 2 different, one would be the town going in and, I mean, DEM could go in and
do that, yep.
if they wanted to. I mean, I
And
don't
with respect to the conservation easement, and I don't mean this in an adversarial way, that was my client acquiescing to that. I'm not necessarily sure that there's a regulation that provides that as a requirement, but as part of our negotiation and agreement, that was agreed to. So.
I don't have anything else, guys.
Minor question, you answered most of my questions. Utilities, above ground, below ground?
Below.
Below ground. Thank you.
Mr. Friday?
So the conservation easement in the area of disturbance, I didn't see it on the plans. And my question is also, is that going to be marked in the field?
Before you get into that, Ben, it was on the full set of drawings.
Okay.
But if I sent the full set of drawings to Terry, would have needed a four-wheel drive vehicle to get them. So we sent you representative drawings.
Cool.
What's up on the board is, in fact, the conservation easement. Everything you see in yellow is the conservation easement area. The dotted lines are the limits of disturbance around each of the houses. And as you can see, each house has a fairly constrained area in which people can clear the area, plant a garden, plant a lawn, et cetera. All the rest of that you see in yellow, and I'll put that in. Ryan made this cool graphic for me. So now you can see the wetlands and the conservation easement together. So you can see that the conservation easement is protecting the entirety of the wetlands with the exception of those 3 small areas that were described by Mr. Cato a few minutes ago. And so we feel very comfortable that natural area is going to be left in its natural state. Mr. Marcella has read the conservation easement. I don't believe he has any concerns over it. They made changes on behalf of our first set of comments.
Yeah, my question wasn't about the easement, it was about, is it marked in the field?
I can answer that. So
Go ahead.
It is marked. It's actually marked a couple of times. It'll be marked prior to construction so they can get the soil erosion control measures in place. And then as part of construction, it's actually specified on the plans. There's locations where permanent markers will be placed.
And just to clarify again, following up on Steve's point, who does the inspection of the conservation easement twice a year? Is it an independent party hired by the HOA group?
I believe that's it, yes.
That's the way it's.
And a report is submitted to planning staff.
I'm not sure if it comes directly to me or the
I
town
think-
engineer.
I think
I'd
it
have
go-
to double check
I
that.
think it goes to staff, the report.
We will keep it on file. If there's any concerns with it, we will obviously follow up.
Right. Yep.
Great.
Okay. And that's the HOA, that's the association's responsibility. So there can't be a rogue homeowner there that says they're not doing it.
No, there cannot, and to the extent that there were an issue, as I noted, there is a process for the town to lien the property that's contained in the HOA. I believe in this draft, and I'll just submit on the record to the extent that it isn't at this time, that's a condition that we'll agree to in our revisions as I discuss it with your solicitor. But I do believe that mechanism is in there. I don't think I've ever presented an HOA to a planning board that doesn't have that mechanism or doesn't run in perpetuity.
So when do we all, if this thing goes to final, when do we all come together on the conservation easement and all the specific provisions?
Well, you've got what's been agreed upon
To date,
before you.
but-
If there's a feeling of the necessity to, in a belt and suspenders sort of approach, to add a couple more paragraphs about the town's right to.
No, excuse me, I'm talking about from the applicant's perspective.
Say that again.
If you had any further,
No, at this time, we're
You're
completely
fine.
fine with the
You're fine.
conservation
Okay.
easement as drafted. The HOA, I'm just waiting on Steve's final comments.
Yeah, so they're two different documents.
Right.
So the conservation easement is good,
is good,
and the final is just on the HOA stuff.
fine.
Okay. And I would just submit to the board, the staff report did request that final be administrative. We are requesting that, and it would be my request that the finalization of that document also be a condition to that final. And I would just submit that in my experience, that is traditionally HOA documents are finalized by council, obviously with all the conditions that have been put forward by the board.
But the board would need to agree to final as administrative, if we get to that, right?
That would be a.
If the board wants to
condition
bring it
tonight.
back, we can bring it back.
You can do whatever you want.
That's true.
Not whatever I want, Mr. Rizzo.
If only.
Thank you, on that issue, thank you. Go, I don't have anything else. I'm going to go to the public. Joe, ahead, Joe.
Yeah, just one other thing, there's a correspondence in here that describes the fact that this board did not spend time discussing cluster and other options, and which is totally not true. I don't know where that person got that information, but in any case, that's not true at all. We discussed this, the developer wants to proceed in this fashion, and, but we did discuss in terms of we had other boards' input. We spent a lot of time on this, so this did not come here lightly, in any case.
And if I could just follow up on that comment from Dr. O'Neill. Those items are vested. We have a master plan approval. The only item that was really required to ensure that final vesting right as it relates to this development was the special use permit relief from the zoning board to ensure conformance with the zoning board. So respectfully, what's before the board today truly is the engineering and our ability to build this project in a manner that meets RIDEM regs, your regulations, and we believe we've done that with the plan set and Mr. Cato's testimony.
And we understand that. Thank you. And last question I have before we go to public. Mike, engineering staff is
Satisfied?
satisfied with all the calculations and
Yes, as it
Everything
relates
they've
to,
seen.
as it relates to infrastructure and surety, they have reviewed these numbers. The only caveat that I would add, and it is noted in my memo, is that streetlights were not anticipated in the outline that was provided by Principi Engineering, excuse me, sorry guys, Millstone Engineering, and so the amount of the ultimate amount of the bond will have to add in the cost of the installation of streetlights. So the number that you are looking at tonight on page, the final page 7 of my memo is not going to be the final number. It's going to have to go up a little bit because staff has suggested installation of streetlights at a 150-foot interval. So that would be 3 or 4 lights on that street.
all right.
And we have no objection to that.
Thank you. So I'd like to go to the public. Public should note they need to be recognized. We do have a stenographer, so only one person should be speaking at a time. Remind myself and the board of that as well. Alicia has to swear you in, and I'd ask you to be as concise as you can with your comments. I will say that, Mr. DeLuca, I believe this preliminary stage was certified complete maybe a week ago, 10 days at the most. We have 90 days, 60 days preliminary. The point to the board is, yeah, if we're not ready to make a decision tonight, we can continue it and still have plenty of time to make that decision after you've chewed over public's comments and the presentation and all that. So we still have time. We're not under a gun because it just got certified a week ago. So, okay, who would like to speak? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself and you can be sworn in, please.
I do. Tom Callahan, Callahan, 26 Baltimore Avenue, Narragansett, Rhode Island. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As I said, I'm Tom Callahan. I am here in my personal capacity. Some of you may know I serve as an alternate on the zoning board. I'm not here to reflect any other views but my own personal. I'm a resident of the abutting neighborhood to the east, and as I said, not here as an alternate member of the zoning board. There are 3 things, in my judgment, you must consider before making any findings regarding the preliminary plan. First, you have to determine whether the applicant has met the letter and the spirit of the requirements that this board established in granting the conditional master plan approval to the applicant in 2018. Second, you have to determine whether the applicant's preliminary plan meets the standards established pursuant to Section 45-23-60. Finally, you have to determine whether the applicant's preliminary plan is properly before you this evening. I'm not sure how you're going to do all of that, at least not this evening. With respect to the master plan conditions that were made conditions of submitting the preliminary plan, from the outset, the applicant's plan to build 5 residences, which the applicant says will cost well over $1 million each, and we now learn from the homeowner association covenants cannot be smaller than 3,000 square feet. On a 20-acre site that's approximately 43% freshland wetlands and home to a half-dozen vernal pools, has been well and considered. If past this prologue, we know from this developer's track record in Narragansett that these will likely be residences for rent and not homes, not owner-occupied homes. As the applicant plans have advanced from master plan to site review, with the likely adverse impact of the proposed development's fragmentation on these wetland resources, particularly to the value and functions and values for the habitat for DEM amphibian species of special concern became a central concern to this board. So much so that just 2 years after this board conditionally approved the applicant's master plan, it recommended the zoning board deny the applicant's request for variances to construct the road and create 2 of the 5 lots. This board conditioned its master plan approval on 15 items. Let's focus on 3 that are required to be presented to the board when it considers the applicant's preliminary plan. First, the applicant needed to provide a further report on the vernal pools, focusing on whether pools 4 and 6 were open or flowing for the purposes of establishing what the nature of amphibian life might be there. That report was submitted and is in your hands. Second, and this is language that I quote simply from the letter, the approval letter itself, it is clear and unambiguous that there must be a conservation easement satisfactory to the board, consistent with the prior map submission and also consistent with the comprehensive plan's Greenbelt policy statements. Third, the applicant has to submit a homeowner's agreement that includes adequate provisions for enforcing the terms of the conservation easement by the town and the individual homeowners. Finally, the board went well out of its way to make clear that because of the sensitivity of the site, the board went well out of its way to make clear that it retained the right to accept, reject, or amend these documents, and, quote, this approval of the master plan is conditioned upon the fact that this planning board will have the right, and to the extent that we do not have the right or are not satisfied with the document as presented, the board retains the right to vote against the project at preliminary plan. Strong language indeed. With respect to the conservation easement and homeowners agreement, the relevant comprehensive plan Greenbelt policy statements can be found on the roadmap document and land use provisions 2.3 and 2.4, specifically on maintaining water quality, wildlife habitat, and biological diversity. Outside of adding the critter crossing on driveway in the proposed Lot 2, or is that Lot 1? Lot 1, excuse me. Not much is materially changed in the applicant's plans that will mitigate the adverse impact of fragmentation on critical wildlife habitat since the time this board recommended against the variances that were sought by the applicant. So you need to decide whether this easement, the homeowners agreement, the homeowners association's agreement, and the map work together, have the requisite teeth to accomplish consistency with the comp plan's Greenbelt policy statements. How will you know whether the water quality and the biological diversity is being maintained at the site before and after, during and after development? You might also ask staff and council how the proposed easements and agreements comport with conservation easement best practice, including the provisions of Rhode Island's Manual for Conservation Easement Guidance, Should you conclude that you find these documents meet the letter and spirit of your request, consider adding two new provisions to the scope of the inspection requirements of the homeowners agreement. The first would require an appropriately timed, not in the summertime, appropriately timed annual field survey to test the vernal pool areas to track the health, vitality, and resilience of the amphibians from the onset of construction and concluding 5 years after its build-out. The second is to include in the scope, include a scope and schedule for maintaining the proposed pervious driveway maintenance as was required in Condition 5 of the Zoning Board's special use permit approval. Fertilizer is excluded, I don't know whether it's purposefully or not, from Section 3C of the homeowners agreement. Lawn monoculture and fertilizing is not conducive to protecting water quality from runoff, especially given the proximity of wetlands on Lot 5. With respect to the vernal pool study, the applicant has complied with the request for the vernal pool study. The board's decision to condition the consideration of the preliminary plan on its receipt, though, was not perfunctory. It did so recognizing the importance and the sensitivity of the habitat and the wildlife on the site, and a lack of clarity and conclusiveness of the applicant's efforts to bring that to bear during the master plan's consideration. It's important to understand the background on how this board request arose, especially for those of you who are new members. It is a long and complicated saga. I won't attempt to recount it here now. Instead, I'd like to either provide my testimony, or, Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether the testimony provided during the master plan phase is still part of the record here, but if it's not,
I believe it is.
is it, Steve? Testimony during master plan, is it part of the record? Is it part of the record for preliminary determination? Right. Okay, all right. Okay. I got it, but it's preliminary, they got approval subject to conditions, and we're talking about the conditions right now. And reserving the right to reject, approve or reject, depending on what they found. I mean, the language is clear in the letter. Yeah, okay, so I guess I'm happy to either refer to it or provide it. I've got a copy of it tonight, but it's
I
the,
would object to the reading or the reference to master plan testimony, which is a vested right, which is not an issue in this hearing. And quite frankly, this testimony is an invitation to this board to revisit vested rights, dive into the jurisdiction of DEM, and quite frankly, none of this testimony is supported by an expert in any way. It's lay testimony, and we should not be talking about the master plan decision. It's an invitation.
He's a member of the public. Can he speak? Let him speak.
thank you. So it's important to understand the background on how the board's request arose. It's a long and complicated saga. I won't recount it now. If you're interested, either go back and read the testimony from November of 2019. So this board needs to decide if the applicant has met both the spirit and the letter of the underlying condition, and whether it's simply engaging in a check-the-box exercise. Yes, we've received that report. With respect to the standards for section 45-23-60, at master plan, this board found the applicant's project to be consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. The specific guidance for this location, however, is to strongly encourage cluster housing to protect natural resources at the site. Pursuant to the staff memo, the subdivision does not comply with the ordinance's lot and wetlands requirements. That's the staff's memo that went to you as a board member today. For the reasons stated above, and as presently designed, the project as presently designed presents significant adverse impacts to wetlands, vernal pools, upland habitat attributable to fragmentation that will result from road, driveways, and home sites. Lastly, procedural fairness matters, and I don't know the answers to these questions. I raise them as part of my due diligence in reviewing the file. First, Rhode Island DEM's insignificant impact determination permit 17-0174. The provisions of that were initially approved in 2017. They were good for 4 years, and that permit expired. It is my understanding that it was renewed in October of 2021. However, I did not see a copy of that letter in the file. Please independently confirm the terms, conditions, and the term of extension before taking action. Second, the zoning board's approval of special use permits required the applicant to secure building permits as of May of 2022, unless a state or federal permit was required. I'm presuming the applicant is relying on the fact that they had to apply for a state permit for a subdivision suitability study. The applicant did not submit a subdivision suitability permit to DEM until February of 2023. Did the applicant's special use permit expire? Third and finally, the Section 5 of the town's subdivision and land regulation prescribes the review and approval process for plats and plans. Section C4 addresses the expiration of master plan approvals. It states that approvals expire 1 year from the date of the final approval. Does the term final approval refer to final approval of the master plan, or does it refer to the approval of the board's subsequent consideration of the final plan? That concludes my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? No one else in the public. Thank you. So I'll let Mr. Resnick come back, but gentlemen, you're going to want to continue this to another date, or do you want to make a decision tonight, do you think?
Just
Yep.
for the record,
Yep,
the reason I hesitated, in our subdivision regulations, it actually says 120 days, but state law is 90 days, so we have 90 days.
We have-
When we're changing our subdivision regs in next
Okay.
6 months, we'll make
but
sure.
we have plenty of time, so.
You do.
Okay, so Mr. Resnick, I don't think we're going to make a decision tonight, so you can have a couple minutes, and then we're going to go on to the next item on the agenda.
I really have no other response than just to say that the opinion or the statement that our zoning relief has expired is false. That's not the law. It's been told. The concept that our master plan expired and wasn't told is false. That's not the law. We would not be before you this evening with a certificate of completeness and duly authorized notice, which was delivered to your staff this morning, unless your staff and your solicitor determined that our master plan and our zoning relief was still in place. That's the end of the story. And with respect to this objector, this community member who has been part of this process from the beginning, particularly with respect to his advocacy that we not link up to town sewer systems, this is lay testimony. You have before you Mr. Cato, who's given expert testimony. It is the only competent testimony that is before this board by an engineer as to the items that are within your purview with respect to this preliminary application. And while I understand that the board has the right to continue this matter for further review, we would request that a vote be taken tonight. We believe that all the answers, all the questions that have been asked, all the conditions that have been requested or demanded have been fulfilled. And I would submit to the board that it's time for this project to move forward. I know that this is not this board's responsibility, but I will let you know, and I think it's important to make part of this record, that when we had to go to the town council and the subcommittee in order to change this plan relative to the sewer connection issue and the design of the OWTS systems, it took 18 months for your subcommittee to meet. It was a duration of almost 2 years before we had an answer from the town council. That is fundamentally unfair. It's not this board's problem, but that is what we call in my profession a due process violation. And we are requesting that this board approve this project tonight so that this developer can move forward with this project. Thank you.
Well, okay, as you stated, that's not our responsibility, and I'm not going to be rushed into a decision because of some delays that did or didn't exist at the hand of another part of our town.
Understood, Mr. Chairman. I'm
So-
not demanding it. It's certainly within your right to continue it. I just think it's important for this board to know, because you do have new board members, that the concept that this project was delayed by over 18 months because of that is something I've never seen, to be candid. So we would request that we get a vote this evening, but if we don't, we'll be prepared to come back here and answer any further questions. And I can tell you when we come back, we will have a comprehensive response to the opposition we heard tonight.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just one thing, I just want to make a point before you say anything. If there's any item in the preliminary stage that anybody on the board wants any confirmation from the engineering department or Steve and Mike, any kind of peer review on anything, it's still available. But if the requisite staffs have looked at everything, I'm just leaving that out there. I don't know if anybody wants to ask for anything, but we still have
I
time.
mean, just from legal standpoint, I'll work with Mike in the next month to finalize any HOA stuff.
HOA
so you
stuff.
guys have that.
Right, so go ahead, Mark.
Before I vote on this, I just like everything cleaned up that, you agreed to and you even said could be conditions. I like it not to be a condition. Let's get them all tightened up. The one thing I would like to, and I'm embarrassed because I missed it, and I just assumed it was in there because of the concentration of wetlands and where this is saddled in there. I think a provision for no fertilizer, et cetera, I assumed was in there, because that's usually what comes before us. I think it's a valid note. Obviously, you'll do what you intend, and obviously, homeowners will do what they intend. But I think that was a valid thing.
And
But I'd
Mr.
like to
Brady, just to that point, sorry to interrupt, I'll discuss that with my client, and you'll have an answer in the HOA, and I'll send a communication to the board so we know where we are with that situation
no
before the
doubt.
next hearing.
But I'd like to see all the stuff that's sitting here that everybody's kind of agreed upon, just tightened up, and let's just get this back on as fast as
Well,
we can.
all the reason to continue.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion?
Move to continue.
Motion by Dr. O'Neill. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Mr. Brady. All those, excuse me. Oh, date certain? I think we need to do it just to keep on track, even though we got some time at the next regular meeting in August. Is that,
Yeah, I didn't know what they.
Can you guys get this all done by then? That's my question.
Well, legal for HOA, I can get that, we can get that.
Yeah.
That's-
We're gonna have it all done, that August meeting. I don't have the date off the top
I
of my
think
head.
it's the 18th, I think.
I just don't want you guys coming back here again saying, hey, we're in the midst of it, we're close to it. I'd like to have it all buttoned up.
That's not gonna happen. We'll be ready to.
Sorry,
check
I think it's the
next hearing.
15th. All right.
Just one final item, just for clarification, for purposes of your motion. My understanding is that the public hearing will be kept open.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have to
Steve?
modify?
Is it the 15th?
Yeah, so continue to the next regular meeting, Joe?
That
Yes.
is my birthday and my wedding anniversary.
And Mark?
So Nancy will be coming.
Mark, you're with us,
Are you
at the
seconding?
next meeting, yeah.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr.
All those in
Chairman.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
We'll
members of
see
the
you.
board.
We'll see you next time. Okay. Thank you. Next. Recommendation to the Town Council, Narragansett Casino LLC, request for Class B Vitular Limited Alcohol License, 11 Pier Marketplace, Plat C, Lot 181-1A. This is a request, a referral from the Town Council for a recommendation regarding liquor license, Steve, for the existing permitted uses only in the Narragansett Casino. This does not apply in any way to the second floor proposed plan or even to the arcade. That's my understanding. Who's here to represent the casino? Ms. Kelly?
So I have to say, Lori Kelly, anything else than that?
No,
swear in
just
or-
identify, you don't have to be sworn in.
Okay,
Alicia, thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for having me back here again. I know we add a lot of drama to this, hopefully not from my side, but, you know, these are always exciting hearings. We are open for business, I'm happy to report. We're doing a lot of family-friendly gatherings, birthday parties. We're showing free movies in the pier. It's our attempt to bring back the pier and helping Narragansett in that way as well. Part of our business plan was we are open. We do have business uses that were permitted by this board and the council. We just want to add alcohol service to that, which was previously approved in 2012, which would be beer and wine only, and it would be, yes, you're correct, not in the arcade. The reason there's that crazy line there is we do have a draft beer bar there. There's no seating, which the town clerk advised me, which is fine, that people can go in and order food and drink from there because the kitchen's behind that, and then go out into the other places to, enjoy their beer and wine. So the C is completely off as far as alcohol or use right now because it is not being used as an event space. The other thing, I guess my only other comments would be on, unless, of course, you might have questions, was that Mike DeLuca had two comments, which were, if we needed a sign off by the landowner. And I know I went back and forth with the clerk's office, and I believe Christian Infantolino reached out to Mark Davis and pointed out that the DBR says, the licensed premises is the portion of the license owned, leased, or controlled by the licensee of which alcohol beverage may be sold. We own it, we control it, so there should not be a leasing issue on the ground lease. The second thing was the use of Unit C, which is the arcade. What we had on the schedule is the arcade, which we are not currently using, and we are not going to be serving alcohol or using alcohol in there. We're going back to the 2012 previous uses, so it's just those three buildings, or I'm sorry, those three rooms that are outlined in red on your,
Which would be the lobby, the theater, and the banquet, I'll call it a banquet room.
right, right.
Now, okay, anything else before I have my question? So the bar, as I walked in and saw it, it's sitting there, it's permanent in that location, so you need access to it if this is granted, right? That's
Yes.
why, but it's in the arcade room.
It is in the arcade room, but there's just a little hallway, and it's directly on your
Right.
left, so it's not, you're not going all the way in.
Right.
Again, the town clerk said if there's no seating at the bar, that would be fine. I don't
And
know if
I
that's
just,
true. I mean,
personally, I found it a little confusing in that the pinball machines were unplugged and some of them were in the middle of the room. So clearly it wasn't set up to be used, but the pool table was there. So, and there wasn't any, the public wasn't blocked from going in there. So it
Well,
just seemed a little confusing to me whether that was available or not.
Right. So we were advised by the town that we had to go back to previous uses and not have gaming
Right.
in there. So we have put velvet ropes in front of that.
Oh, I didn't see the
building.
ropes.
Well, I mean,
Saturday, I think I
okay.
went in Saturday and walked
It's possible
through.
that they
I just
weren't
took
out,
a
but
look through.
that came out like Thursday, Friday of last week, and we're trying to comply with that.
Okay, okay, that's fine, and you know, and I know you know, but on your website, people are playing the arcade games. There's pictures, and on Facebook, there's pictures, but I just want, on the record, for you to just, you
Yes,
have stated,
we have
it's
pulled
not
that-
being used.
Right. So how we've been running it, which is not a good business plan, is we've been having like what we call a soft opening. We've had it free to the public. We've been playing 3 movies for free every day. Today, we've taken off because we have a bunch of hearings. But, we're trying to get people interested in the space and then go from there. So yes, I can't promise I can get all those down because sometimes once they're out, they're out. But we have blocked it off. We are not going to be serving alcohol there. Right now, it's not going to be used as an arcade. It may have to go back to previous use of an, unfortunately, an entertainment center, or we may have to apply again for change of use.
And the alcohol service, just make me feel, everyone's tip certified that's
Yes.
going to be handling that?
Yes,
They're
we're already all
well-versed-
tip service.
They're well-versed
We have-
in making sure that the alcohol is managed correctly.
Well, for instance, I'm new to it, so I'm, feeling my way, but I've taken the things and we take it very seriously. We don't want to endanger our business at all.
Right.
So again, we're committed to following the law on all of these things.
In 2012, folks, the liquor was granted by the council, beer and wine, for the theater, for the banquet room, for what's existing there, which is an accepted use today. So you're just trying to resurrect that for now, come back, who knows, in the future for more, if
Yeah,
or not.
Right.
That's up to you.
But step by step, as you see us here over and over.
Joe?
I know where you're serving it, but how do you contain it? In other words, if somebody picks up a beer or a glass of wine, why can't they go anywhere?
Well, anywhere in the open rooms, the third room we are not using as an open room now. So it's going to be closed off. We have the theater velvet ropes, which we have put
So you can
up
take
by
a drink
DEC.
back to the theater.
Right, you can take a drink back to the theater, you can go back into the lobby, you can
Okay.
go into the entertainment space if we're having an event.
And how about out of the building?
No, because we don't have, it's not open container in Narragansett, right? So we don't have an outside space that we have been given permission to serve alcohol on. Wouldn't that be a
Well,
different?
we discussed this with other people who have outdoor facilities. How do they contain it rather than, go out for a walk along the seawall with their drink? So in any case, why, you're obviously making an effort, yeah.
So you would have people at the door, obviously, and say,
Yeah, checking
can't go.
IDs and the whole thing. I
Right,
mean, we've run a
okay.
couple of events, and we've done that. We were here, we're not for planning, but we did a one-day event with the URI engineering students. So they had a list, we checked licenses, we tagged them with bracelets, and only those people were allowed to serve. And then we had tip-certified people going around to make sure they weren't, giving drinks to other people.
yep. Folks, anything else? Well, go ahead, Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask staff, how come this is before us? We've never had any requests from the town council. Is this, let's all go down together, or what's the story?
Oh, Doctor, it's quite unique. In the past, you have had numerous applications come before you for change of use. Restaurants turning into business areas, restaurants changing hands. And the way the urban renewal regulation is written, any change of use has to be approved by the town council with a recommendation from the planning board. Closely parallels the way you work with the zoning board. But in this case, the town council is acting as the deciding body. We've never had an application where it was only the liquor license because all of the uses have already been approved and they were discontinued for a period of time. Now they're just being restarted, but the uses have been verified within the town. The theater, the function room, the lobby area were already approved for the use that has been proposed and is underway. The only change at this juncture is requesting the liquor license. So that's the change. It's not change in use, but that is the alteration that is going to the council. And the way the regulation reads, anything going to the council has to come to you for relief, for recommendation.
Anything else? We'll go to the public.
Nope. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Anyone in the public have a comment? Mr. Indalia. State your name for the record, please.
Certainly. May it please this honorable board, my name is Vincent Indalia. I'm with the law firm of Indalia Latrario. I represent the landowner of the property where the applicant is seeking to obtain this change of use within the urban renewal district and obtain this board's recommendation to the town council for a liquor license. This is not the first time this particular property has been before this board. It's no secret that the property owner of the land on which this facility is operating objects to it. The board is aware, and just so that everybody's clear, because I see at least one new member that I haven't really appeared before. There's ongoing active litigation between the landlord and the tenant, of which Ms. Kelly is a member. The landlord, in this particular case, has not consented to this change of use on its property. There was a mention by, I'm not sure if it was the solicitor or the head of the Department of Community Development, Mr. DeLuca, about the fact that at once and upon a time, I think going back to 2011 or 10, there had been an allowance for a liquor license here. That came before this board at that time with an application that was completed and filled and executed by Gilbane, who was the property owner at the time. Gilbane gave authority and consent to that application. This board is aware of the fact that in the past, when it's had jurisdiction to make actual decisions, and I don't knock the process that we're doing, there's a procedural process. This application must come before you for a recommendation to the town council. Likewise, this board's made other types of recommendations or other decisions on applications, and in fact, recently there was a decision unrelated to liquor licenses where the board rejected an application because it was not complete. And that went to an appeal, and the appeals board determined that you're correct. You cannot rule or make a positive finding on an application which is not complete. The application that has been submitted on behalf of the operator of this facility is not complete because it does not have the landlord's consent. I'll give you an example. Years ago, this board approved Monahan's Dock to have a Class B liquor license. A lot of discussion, parking, protective areas on the part, right? Doc, you were concerned about going outside. If they flipped back to the site plan shown by the applicant, you'll see that there were areas to be done. All of that was discussed. However, when we reviewed the application to determine whether or not it could be allowed to occur, if you look at the application, Monahan's was in fact its own owner. It wasn't leasing the land. And in fact, when it came to the parking, it had permission from the state and DEM to use that land for some of its parking. This would be the first time that somebody that owned land did not give their consent to a tenant applying for a liquor license. So I want you to be aware of that. Remember, too, that yours is a recommendation. You're not making the final decision. As you know, the analogy I think that was given by Mr. DeLuca was it's like, you know, the recommendations on a site review that you give to the zoning board. They can accept it, they can reject it, they can modify, they can do what they want. However, in this case, the town council does take seriously the recommendation of the planning board because you're supposed to consider that urban renewal district. It's a unique district. Some of us were alive and there when they did the whole thing. Doc, I'm pointing right at you and present. Terry, you probably in college.
Yeah, I don't remember it.
Yeah, because you were in college.
Right.
But in any event, that particular building is only limited to its exterior walls. It has no parking. It has no ability to, other than a few spaces that are open to easement. It has no true parking plan for this project. The immediate abutters that contain the majority of the 200 feet surrounding is the landlord. He owns all the buildings, all of the facilities that are where the coffee shop is, where the poke bowl is, the land immediately behind the facility. So the 200-foot radius objects to this use being done under these particular conditions. So if you were to make a favorable recommendation, you would have to, I think, in fairness to the town council, inform the town council we're making a favorable recommendation, but it's not a complete application. We're making a favorable recommendation, but there's really no parking for the number of patrons that will be sitting there. And you folks have been big on parking on this board. Maybe past members that were more irresponsible than you, I won't mention who his name was, might have voted for parking in certain locations. But with all seriousness, there is no parking available to these patrons. You would have to make the recommendation and advise them that the 200-foot abutters that abutted this all objected, except I can't speak for Trio. I don't know if they're here tonight, but Trio has consistently come before you on other applications by this particular tenant objecting to that activity. So Yeah. I never represented Trio, and I have never spoken on this application or anything whatsoever to do with Trio or this particular the Narragansett Casino. I've not opposed it. I never sat on any I was never on a committee when it came before you. I was only recently engaged.
Okay.
So, I think you need to take those considerations very seriously when you make that decision. My client is concerned on an issue raised by Dr. O'Neill about people going outside and perusing outside. Again, we're concerned about that because now it's not within the province of what this applicant is using. Because remember, they only have from the doorway in. Anything on the outside they don't own. And if their patrons are going outside, they're on my client's property. And he objects to that, and there's no lease there. There's no argument about a lease. For the record, because my colleague, Mr. Doherty, is here, we want to make it very clear that while the town is not the arbitrator of whether or not this is a proper person or entity inside that building or not, you're not part of the landlord-tenant dispute. Just for the record, my client makes it very clear that this entity is in fact a trespasser and is not on that property with legal due course. That's why we've been in several different forums and are currently in a litigation proceeding. In fact, I had the pleasure of sitting most of my morning with Ms. Kelly and part of that legal proceeding, which won't see the light of day until sometime at the end of this year.
Okay.
So I'd like you to really consider that when you make this recommendation. I've said that a number of times. But most importantly, you do have precedent for the behavior of this board, and one thing you should be having is consistency. And you have consistently said, and Mike, the chairman of the Planning Commission, department rather, has consistently said, if your application is not complete, you cannot hear it. And you've gotten authority for that, and you have precedent on this particular property. The only reason, not the only reason, a reason the liquor license was granted in the past to a previous acknowledged tenant of the landowner was because the landowner executed that application. And if you need to get that application to consider it before you make your recommendation, I'd ask you to kick this over a month, and we'll pull that application out of the annals of the town hall.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Indalia. Wait a minute, I got Mr. Doherty and Mr. Indalia on the same, come on up, Mr. Doherty. You're going to be briefer than Vinnie was.
How come Mr. Doherty last time only got 3 minutes, but Mr. Indalia got as long as he wanted?
You know that, Mr. Marcello, thank you. Thank you so much.
Now we have
No,
to
I
give
think that was the-
we
I
have to
think that
give
was the
you as
council,
much as you
but,
want.
thank
Wow.
you. But, I
Where's
mean,
the bus that he just threw me under, huh? Go ahead, Mr. Doherty.
I follow up on the comments of consistency and what is uniform. And I remember back in August 16th of 2022, as a matter of fact, we're 1 month shy of a year. This application was before this board. And one of the admonitions that the board had placed a great emphasis on was the availability of parking, and that it was desirable to get a traffic or a parking study done in order to show that they could keep up with the amount of volume of patronage that they plan on doing here. And I'm not going to get into any of the other arguments that Mr. Indalia brought up, that are in litigation right now, but they didn't come up with anything to show you that they could satisfy the parking. And in fact, on what you saw on the earlier slide, they had, I counted 285 seats. There were 136, 149, I believe that's 170, 285 right there. And then there was another area that they were talking about, service bar, no seats. But how can they possibly show, with the limited amount of parking that is available in that pier area, that they can service those types of numbers in that facility? So the other thing that I wanted to point out was a year ago, this matter was proceeding before the town council and before the planning board. And one of the holdups, and it was ultimately withdrawn by the applicant,
Right.
and one of the holdups was the lack of the owner's signature on the application. And if you look at your own files, Gilbane's signatures were required. There are letters in the town files in the Department of Community Development and Planning that required the sign-off of Gilbane, who was the landlord. In that case, it was clear there was an established landlord, an established tenant. Here, you're even further removed from that type of a situation because the owner, who would be the landlord, is contesting that there is even a tenant. And although they can say when they come up here that they own, lease, or control the premises, there's a 100% argument to the opposite of that. If you look at the leases that are there, they have to obtain the landlord's prior consent to alter or change any uses. That's under section 11.2.1. They require the landlord's signature under their own lease. No request has been done. There's nothing in the file. Under section 22.2 of that lease, all the improvements revert to the ownership of the landlord upon termination for cause or otherwise. So you have a landlord here who's saying, I don't consent, I don't agree, I object, and we don't recognize this person, and I can't for the life of me understand why our town is departing from decades worth of proven track record in what the requirements are, something a year ago that got taken off the table for lack of an owner's consent to the application and a signature, and we're still back here again. And it's got to stop. I mean, at some point, there has to be a continued consistency. And that's what gives all the citizens of the town some kind of, a leg to stand on, to know that when they come before a board, the rules are going to be applied uniformly. The requirements of an application are going to be, required uniformly of all applicants. They heard your admonitions before. Where's the showing of the parking? We're saying they don't have it, they can't do it. And as a citizen and a business owner and an attorney coming before this board as well, I'm urging you, just follow the law. Follow your own town rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the public wish to speak? No. Mr. Marcella. First of all, before that, Mr. DeLuca, I believe,
Marcel.
I believe the parking, again, it all goes back to the premise of this was a use back in the day and it's just being resurrected. But I believe the parking was verified for the theater and the banquet area and the lobby.
In 2012.
Yes.
That's right.
Right. So what has transpired from the first time this came to us, and I don't want to talk about how frustrating this whole process has been because everybody's frustrated, but there was talk about going upstairs, there was talk about opening the arcade. All of that would have required additional parking documentation.
Correct.
It's my understanding, and I think we took the applicant to task last time when they came to us for the arcade, when we decided that it was in fact a change of use, and then they went back to the council and then withdrew it. But we had taken them to task for the lack of parking documentation, and I think if they come back with the arcade and with the second floor, we're going to ask for more extensive documentation from a parking engineer, traffic engineer, whatever. But this one, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, the parking for the use that was up until 2012 had already been verified for the areas of this and the actual use, theater and banquet facility.
Yeah, short answer, yes. The theater space, the event space, which used to be Theater 2, and the arcade, which used to be Theater 3, had a certain demand created a certain demand for parking that in sum total exceeded the demand that is created as shown here on the graphic by what is now Theater A, function room, and the arcade area that's being used for the bar because it has no seating. I put it in my staff report because I was unsure at the time of the writing, but that arcade area, if you leave that out because they're not using it,
They're not using it.
and we even add in the 40 seats that are designated for the lobby area, the parking demand is still less than the demand in 2012 with 3 theaters.
That was approved, okay.
So
Then
we've got, that's why I looked
All
at
right.
this and thought, we've got similar circumstance, and we are only looking at a liquor license.
Okay, and then the second point is, to Mr. Marcello, there is a condition that if this board finds the recommendation to be favorable to the council, it does come with a condition, if the board adopts it, that the landowner has to sign the application, which would be up to the council to require, right?
Yeah, that legal argument is essentially for the council, in my opinion.
It's for the council.
Correct.
And we're, in your position, we're still, because the council recommended something, referred something to us for a recommendation, we're obligated to give that.
We're obligated to give the recommendation. There's no, we don't, in this case, in the urban renewal zone, we don't have to certify anything complete like in a subdivision application.
Correct.
Or anything like that. So we're just going forth, and my suggestion would be, you certainly can comment on that, there are legal issues which should be dealt with at the town council level. You should also review the application for what it's here for, which is the liquor license and the true concerns of the liquor license of people going in and out, the event space, not cordoned off, I'll call it the normal criteria. And then obviously, Mr. Davis, and, they can make those arguments.
They'll make a statement to the council as to whether the
Correct.
application is complete at that point.
And to take it up, correct.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, if I didn't make myself clear, the application, while there are other legal issues which the landowners have brought up, the application in and of itself may have issues regarding the pure operation of the liquor license, which you may or may not want to comment on.
Right. So again, I wanted to make sure that the arcade area was cordoned off, that the public couldn't get in there, and that the employees were tip certified, and that there was proper security at the doors. Beyond that, I'm not sure what other provisions we should be making sure that they're following. So does anybody else have any comments?
So the other image you had up, does that show the ground lease that we're talking about here? Is that yellow area the ground lease?
No, in fact, that's really only being utilized for its value as an aerial photograph because even the lot lines are incorrect. These lot lines have been changed. So no, I don't think this is the theater right here.
So I guess I wonder,
I don't know
trying to
the
understand
extent
where
of
the
the ground
ground lease is compared to.
I don't have access to that information.
All right, so, yeah, so.
Wait a minute, then. Wait a minute. Go ahead, Steve.
So just a couple of things, because I don't want to get into a back and forth with the public. You gave public comment, so I'm not going to comment until they comment as all as they want. I'm here to advise you guys, so I see them wanting to comment. I'll leave that up to you whether you want them to comment. So at one time, the urban renewal zone was owned by one owner. That was Gilbane. The land was owned by Gilbane, and then the buildings, depending either were owned by Gilbane or they were built by third parties. Those third parties entered into a land lease. For instance, Belmont Market had a land lease, Gilbane had the land. through, to make a long story short, when the condominiums came in, that carved out some land. When the library came in, that carved out some land. When Trios came in, that carved out some land.
So those are all removed from
And
the...
those are all removed from, I'll call it the big original urban renewal zone. It's my understanding that Beachcomber came in and bought what I would call the remaining parcel, which is more the center area of it. It includes parking, it includes buildings. The only area, the only entity in dispute is this entity.
So they own the other buildings?
Correct. Narragansett Casino bought the personal property, and that's what all the litigation's about. So you really can't go
Okay.
off that map.
Okay, got it.
Because obviously the library is carved out, the town owns part of that, and the condos own part of that. It's actually brutally complicated.
All right. I want to go on. And so I'll pull rank here, and you guys can have 3 minutes, but we're making a recommendation. The council's going to make the final decision, and don't hassle this whole legal thing again, because we're just going to make a recommendation based on council. So go ahead, Mr. Indalia.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, based upon the comments by the staff and not so much from its counsel, who I have a great deal of opinion for, but from the staff, the point was that there was a parking plan that was approved in 2012. I want the board to be aware that factually that is true. Factually, however, the world has changed in the last 11 years, and the parking that was part of that plan, which included the parking that Trio uses all in the back, that is now owned by Trio. It is not available to this applicant. I can show you what... hold on, just one at a time, come on. Well, no, I was going to show where it is, yeah.
I knew this was going to get fun with these two.
No, but...
How does this thing get turned on?
Just don't hit their eyes, man. You got it?
So, yeah,
Patrick?
so the area where he's talking about
right
Trio,
And all these spaces along here and up into here have been dedicated to Trio pursuant to a legal agreement. So those are off the table insofar as any parking for Narragansett, for the rest of the tenants in the entirety of this area. In addition to that, other parking that Mr. Indalia was referring to was up here along the old pier market, which is the library. As part of that, the town was required to purchase parking spaces. So there's well over 100 spaces off the table that were integrated into that 2012 parking approval. So all of these spaces over here, everything down along here, and everything up in this area, those are all gone.
Well,
they exist, but they are not available. All right, and that's all I wanted to point out was Mike's calculation is absolutely, he was saying the absolute truth when he stated that that was available in 2012. The world has changed. That was the first point I wanted to make. As to the recommendation and your recognition that there may be a legal issue that another solicitor may have to determine, it's still no different when you're asked to make a recommendation on what's been handed to you. You have to look at what was handed to you. One of the requirements is that they give you the site plan, right? You guys spent detail looking at the footage and everything. If they came in and didn't give you the site plan, which was required as part of the application, your recommendation would be, I'm not going to forguess it, but you might say, well, bring us back a site plan so we can see how many seats and everything you're going to have. Bring us back an application that has all the requirements. Bring us an application that has it. I'm not saying you're going to make a recommendation, say, oh, no, we shouldn't do it. I'm just telling you, it is only fair and transparent to everybody that has to consider this that you include in your recommendation, up or down, or undecided, that the application wasn't complete, because you've done it before, and that's only fair.
Thank you, Mr. Indalia. Okay. Let's move on. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, in general, find this unfortunate. I mean, this is an urban renewal area. It has been, as I'll politely put it, neglected for how long? And, I wish these two parties could figure this out, because all I hear is excitement about this in town. People are really excited. People are using it. It's unfortunate. But to me, My understanding is we're just here to vote on this recommendation to the town council on the liquor licensing. That is it.
For uses that have existed, and that's our solicitor's recommendation. And obviously, again, the first condition suggested by staff is that the council obtain an application with the landowner's signature. So, I mean, we can't, I guess we could say this is incomplete, but. Yeah. So, what's your pleasure there, folks? Oh, by the way, no, go ahead. And I think, as Steve pointed out, if there's any conditions relative to the management of the alcohol, they should be noted. I made my comments. If anybody in the motion wants to include those comments. I think the arcade section is depicted on Facebook and on the website as being operational. It's not, and the applicant has said that it's not operational and won't be. So I think it should be blocked off, but go ahead.
Do we need the application is complete and conforms to town? We
no,
don't need that. This
no,
is just a
we don't
recommendation
need
to
that.
the town.
Yeah, it's just a
Town council.
recommendation on the council. Turn on your mic, will you?
So I was trying to keep notes as this ping pong ball was bouncing all over the place. To add a comment that legal issues, outstanding legal issues of several kinds.
Well, yeah, if you look at page 7.
Yeah.
You could make a recommendation to follow staff memorandum, including, they recommend approval, but there are conditions you could add those if you want to add anything else to A, B. I think that would, right, Mike, that would be the cleanest way to do it.
Can I interject just briefly, Mr. Chairman?
Yep. No, it's not you, Mike. It's, we've mediated neighborhood disputes before, but this one is really getting tedious, so.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Jeez.
I wanted to first say that, within the body of my report, I did make a couple references to the legal conundrum that has been raised on a few occasions by Mr. Doherty and now again here by Mr. Indeglia. So we recognize it. I think that's clear. Secondly, in looking at page 7 of my report, I make a point about the parking demand does not exceed the parking demand of the 2012 land use that was approved. And I think we need to stay in the land use mindset, not the legal interpretation mindset, no matter what our two attorneys have told us. We know that there has been availability of sufficient parking for the floor space that was built in whatever year that was, has never been expanded. Thirdly, that we have been apprised by Ms. Kelly that the arcade room is not part of this application. They do not intend on utilizing it. So my reference to the parking demand on page 4 or 5 could subtract item D, 1D, up there at the top. So when you take out the 194 space potential need, it brings you down to a much lower number, and that number is significantly lower than the demand of, that number is 317, which is, 106 spaces, which is 80 spaces less than the demand in 2012. So just summarizing some of the back and forth you and I have had, Mr. Chairman, the demand based on the land use itself is not going up. And it may not be appropriate at this time to be talking about parking studies related to demand and supply. Not going to talk about ownership, let them worry about that. So here we are just talking about the use of the site, Theater A, Theater B, the lobby, and just the front half of Theater C, where the bar, without any seats at it, is located.
Right.
And
Okay.
that my suggestion was that we could recommend approval, leaving in condition A, which is determination of the sign-off requirement. I'm going to keep that there so that it doesn't lose any momentum, and that the property owner is aware that we are aware that it's still an unresolved issue. And item B could be essentially taken out because it's already been verified by Ms. Kelly. If you want to add any other conditions, I did say on the previous page, or just at the top of this page, that I didn't get into the standard issues that the council looks at, a menu, hours of
No, I
operation,
know.
entertainment. I'm leaving all that out, unless you wanted to
So-
go there.
so-
So we really only have one condition that I see.
But if any of the board members who makes a motion want to add any other conditions, just please do so now. And we'll hear what you want to do. So recommend approval or denial to the council, and with what conditions? Go ahead.
Okay. Reference to liquor license for Narragansett Pier Marketplace, Narragansett Casino LLC. I would move approval based on the use of the facility, the understanding that there are unresolved issues. It would include staff memorandum with land use on page 7, and A, determination of need for sign-off by landowner prior to town council decisions. Also, to include recommendations to the council for consideration that were brought up by this board, people coming in and out, essentially security and procedures to ensure that nothing leaves the buildings, isolation of the bar facility from the arcade facilities, and employees are tip certified.
It's a motion by Mr. Brady.
Isolation of the bar facility from the arcade area, and employees are tip certified.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Brady, second by Dr. O'Neill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. We'll see you next time. Yeah, I think so. Everybody?
You say aye? Yeah, I-
Okay, next item on the agenda is a remand from the Plating Board, Sunset Boulevard, two-lot subdivision, preliminary plan, Sunset Boulevard, Assessors Plat R-1, Lot 155. If you guys remember, we had approved the subdivision with 5 conditions. That was appealed by the owner to the applicant, to the zoning board. They sit as an appeal board to our decision on a subdivision. They upheld 4 of the conditions, and they overturned the first condition that the lot can never be subdivided, and send it back to us. I believe it's our obligation just to affirm that and to restate the motion that we did last time with just 4 conditions. I would suggest that this doesn't mean that the lot will be subdivided. I think it only means that the applicant's not precluded from requesting it. If he wants a subdivision of this lot, he still has to go through the process of requesting and documenting the reasons for the subdivision. So if I missed any of that, Mr. Marcello? Yeah, I mean, either us or administratively, but yeah, the subdivision laws are changing, so it would either be the staff approval or us, but it would be, depending on the circumstances. Joe?
Yeah, Stephen, we put this clause in, right? I mean, Michael, could you count how many times we put this in? We realize people come back, a new owner, whatever, and they want to subdivide, and that's the right of the owner. But I don't understand why this was taken out here. Can you explain it?
Yeah, it was
but-
included.
But I don't understand. I don't object to their decision, but I don't understand it.
It seemed like the bulk of their decision was, well, he's got to come back for approval anyhow. Did that make sense? To deny, to put that condition on.
But then should we in the future leave that out? I guess that's where I'm going here.
Or find a finding of fact that backs the condition.
Yeah, like huge wetlands, that doesn't count,
Right,
I guess.
some
So is
findings.
that we have to?
I guess.
State that to justify it, clear on that, okay.
And I guess there's some opinion that that was in existence, but we didn't specify it anyhow. He's got to come back to the town to subdivide it. The
No, I
pl-
understand. that,
Yeah,
but And that's why I always wondered why we ever put it in anyway. Because everybody has, this is America, you have a right to come and say.
Correct, you can, if, and that was, I mean, at the zoning board, or the planning board, we got into the discussion of if you even put it in, if you do put it in there, you can always come back, and as long as the lot's not sold, you can come back at a separate time and ask for
an amendment to that.
Sure.
So okay.
Sure.
So,
So we ready for a motion?
To include valid findings as to why.
yeah, in the future, absolutely. So, in your package, the July 19th, well, it's highlighted as July 19th. This is the original decision that I signed that was sent to the applicant. And Mike has just amended that, and will amend that with nothing else changing. And then if you look at the the decision,
The decision.
it's who the two, the motioner and the seconder, and then the first condition's gone, so we would renumber those four conditions, 1 through 4, and that's what we need to do. And then it'll be recorded as final, I believe, Mike.
So we don't need any complete.
No.
business. So move the application before us positively, Sunset Boulevard, two-lot subdivision, Assessor's Plat R1, Lot 155, with the decision modifications, page 4, staff correspondence dated July 19, 2023. Conditions are defined with number 1 condition deleted.
So they'd be renumbered 1 through 4.
So 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Would be 1,
stand.
2, 3, 4.
Stand,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, it's a motion by Dr. O'Neill. Second by Mr. Brady. All those in, oh, wait a minute, I didn't, anybody in the public had a,
Oh, yeah.
not a public, right. Zoning board has
Procedure.
authority.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Site
Can we-
review. Well, I need a 5-minute break.
Is this too exciting?
You ready, Dan? I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Site review, Leclerc, plat Y-3, lot 61, 28 Palm Beach Avenue. Mr. Callahan.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Nice to see you all. It's been a while. James Callahan of Callahan and Callahan, 3 Brown Street in Wickford. I'm here on behalf of Robin and Just Leclerc, sitting to my left. Robin and Just are residents of Narragansett. Robin is a real estate agent, and Just is a well-respected builder with Leclerc Builders. We're here today on 2 requests for relief and recommendations. First, a rear yard setback request. The proposed setback is 27.8 feet where 30 feet is required. And second, we are asking for relief from the hardscape maximum of 35%. We are looking for permission for 42.5%. Admittedly, this case has had somewhat tortured travel already. We're not trying to hide the ball in any way. The foundation for this project at those measurements has already been laid and completed. The work was underway before we received a stop work order, and that was back in the spring, I believe. I wish I could explain exactly how and why that happened, but I can't. I think it's fair to say that Just was undergoing some medical issues, which may have contributed to the situation, but we can't rely on that as an excuse or explanation. I would like to say that the relief of the rear setback is somewhat minimal. It's only 2.2 feet. And the hardscape maximum is 42.5 versus 35%. But that was in some ways a pre-existing condition, as a staff report relays. And again, we acknowledge that the process that has gone on so far has been somewhat less than optimal, but we did meet with Wayne Pimentel 2 weeks ago at the site, and we received permission to close in some of the points of access here, just so that it doesn't become so wet that it's unusable, and that they can work on some of the project that would be allowed without the relief. So if I could, like to ask Just Leclerc to come up and say a few words. Or maybe you can sit there, that might be easier. Or,
Yeah, we can all hear. It's up, however he wants to handle it.
please state your name.
Just Leclerc.
And
Sure. Yeah. My name is Just Leclerc.
and you've lived in Narragansett for a number of years?
Yes, since the early 90s or late 80s.
And you purchased 28 Palm Beach Avenue in 1988, or 1990, I'm sorry.
Yes,
And you're a builder by trade?
yes, I am.
And is it fair to say that you experienced some medical issues this past spring?
Yeah, issues that I like to keep them personal.
Correct. And you're doing your best to overcome those issues. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yes.
And we understand we're here today for a site review on the property at 28 Palm Beach Avenue.
That's correct?
And it's fair to say that work has already begun on the property.
Yes,
And based on the progress of the work, we need a dimensional variance for the rear yard setback and the hardscape maximum.
right.
And is it fair to say this isn't something that you began and started to construct on purpose? This is kind of a mistake?
Yeah, it started a little sooner than it should have.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said it started a little sooner than expected.
And the prior, there was already a sunroom in the back of the
Yeah,
structure.
yes,
And above the sunroom, there was an overhang. Is that fair to say?
yes,
And that overhang, is that where the foundation was poured, approximately?
yes.
And that's what triggers the need for the setback relief?
Yes.
And how many projects have you completed in South County over your career, approximately?
Somewhere around 50.
50? Okay. And is it fair to say this is the first time you've come across this issue?
Yes,
And the relief you're seeking, is it fair to say that provides a different layout for the kitchen and dining room area.
Correct. Gets adjusted, yep.
And the hardscape, you're not necessarily adding any gravel or driveway, it's just the way that the calculations worked out. Is it fair to say?
That's correct.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not really. I think you hit what I would have said.
Any questions, Mr. Leclerc?
Well, if you're all done, I have some questions.
We'll have Ms. Leclerc testify as well, but
Yeah, so was there any work done other than, what's the word? Shoring it up to make sure that it wouldn't get wet? Was there any work done after the cease and desist order was issued?
no. That the
So what I see there was all done prior to the cease and desist order?
The clear plastic was added to allow for less rain to come in. And Just and Robin did apply for a separate building permit in the past 2 weeks, which Wayne Pimentel recommended based on, so they could close off their kitchen area, but it didn't involve the actual variance itself.
But that's internal,
Correct.
right? But there wasn't, and staff under the same understanding, Jill, that nothing was done since the cease and desist?
The building inspector went out on, I believe it was February 21st, which is the first series of pictures that you see. And then they went out again on the 23rd, and there was additional work done, and I believe that's when the actual hard copy paper stop work order was provided. The building official had been out there 2 days prior. These pictures today show it shored up. I believe it's weather tight. They were trying to
Right.
prevent further damage. Correct.
But does the building inspector verbally say you need to stop now?
When I spoke with the assistant building inspector, yes, he was on site and said, stop.
But work was done after that, until the
That's my
paperwork was
understanding.
received?
Those are the images.
And then on the hardscape, the bulk zoning ordinance, the existing house was already over the hardscape allowance of 35%, but that's okay because it was constructed prior to. How much more did the addition add to the overage? Because I know your staff summary generally says what it is from 35% to build out, but how much additional hardscape? Do you have a calculation for that?
I could probably do it. It's about 190 square feet, maybe
In that neighborhood?
just over 100. Give me a minute, Mr. Chairman.
Additional square feet, okay. So the total amount's about 1,000 square feet over, of which you're saying maybe 800 of it already existed. She's using her calculator. Yeah,
107 square feet,
107.
approximately, is what I have
All
in my
right.
calculations. I'm sure Mr. Flynn, their surveyor, could calculate exactly.
okay, thank you. Yes, Mike?
So here's your footprint as it was prior to any changes, and here's your footprint with the new construction. So I'll just toggle back and forth a couple of times. That's the old, that's the new.
Right.
Okay, just so you can see it's
So had you pulled a permit, obviously you know, then the building inspector would have inspected the plans and would have indicated 2 levels of relief, which are now here to get blessed.
Correct.
But the construction's already begun.
Correct.
So, a lot of us on the board, we have to consider whether or not we would have entertained that if it was done properly and legally, whether we would have been okay with those, with recommending those variances or not. That's kind of where we are. So I'm I don't think I would have. I don't think I would on either one, particularly the one that impacted bulk zoning, but even the setback, I think, is enough that we, had it come to us ahead of time, I probably would have wanted the applicant to conform and not make such a big addition, and probably would have not been recommending the variance, but that's just me. Joe, do you have any question?
Yeah, I think, it's you got 14,000 square foot lot, and obviously, if you build approximately 50 different structures in the area, you know the rules and regs. The idea, this is your home, right?
We own that house.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Yes, we own the house.
You own the house, so the idea of, I don't understand why you would do this, because there's no, yeah, if you came before us knowing, today, obviously the regulations all tightened up over the years, you've been a builder for a while, and you know, this board couldn't, maybe the zoning board would give you a variance, but this board couldn't do that, because we created, with the planning department and the town, all the meetings we've had, we created the rules and regulations. So, yeah, my colleague here said that maybe, or it could, well, I don't know how this board could sanctify this in terms of what you did, because it violates everything that's been created in order not to overbuild on 14,000 square feet. So, you filed building plans for the other 49 building sites, right? You didn't do it on this one. I mean, in any case, you know where I'm going. Yeah.
That's where comes the mistake, as you were saying, yes.
It's a mistake, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also troubled by work done after the building inspector said, stop.
Yeah.
So that bothers me.
That's not true, though. That's actually not true.
That's not true?
I don't know if that makes much difference in our, we admit there was mistakes. We can't get beyond that.
Okay.
And, if you want to hold that against them, that's fine. I understand that sort of position.
No, you're right. I think we're back at square one, is should they have pulled a permit, yes, and would we have approved it without it? So,
It's not holding against them. He created the problem. I mean, it's
No, we
the
admit
town.
that.
The town has rules and regulations. We all live by them. I've had some big things done on my property recently. You got to live with the rules and regulations.
yeah, this is a self-created hardship, it
This
seems.
is clearly a self-created hardship, but,
You guys, any questions down there?
yeah, guys.
Yeah, I think council probably told you that we're guided by the law, and the law is a question of hardship. Okay, and one of those legal balances that we adhere to is that the hardship is not a result of any prior action of the applicant. It does not result primarily from the desire of the applicant to realize greater financial gain. And I'm not saying your financial gain. I mean, it's illegal, and you know it's illegal. The thing to me is they created the hardship. So I go back to, if this was presented to us beforehand, would I approve? So I don't have a calculation on the FAR. I meant to follow up on that.
It's not, the FAR's not in play, the
Yeah.
hardscape is.
The hardscape is, so the proposed rear setback is a 7.9, almost 8% difference. That's heavy. But the hardscape is 21.5% difference. I wouldn't approve that. And as much as I would like to, for lack of a better word, help you here, I just find within the scope of what we can do, and we sometimes stretch what we can do, I can't see legally being able to embrace this.
Rupert? No? So, anything else, Mr. Callahan? So I would, the public, I don't think so. That's two council members.
This fellow's, Mr. Leclerc's wife wanted to speak, but.
Oh, no, she could. Did you want to speak? No. Okay.
No.
Okay. We've had cases like this before. And generally what we've done when we haven't agreed with recommending the variance is a motion that essentially says what I think staff's saying with condition 1, that whatever's done be brought back into compliance with the ordinance.
Yep.
That's relative to the setback and relative to the hardscape. So that's what I would probably support. The other conditions, I don't know, Mr. Callahan, do you have any comments on any of the other conditions? I'm just most concerned with number 1. Do you have them on page 2? One through 6, 2 and 3.
We have no objection, however you want to proceed.
Okay, all right. So
So we're ready to move on?
we got to make a motion to complete.
Move the application is complete, conforms with town comprehensive plan.
Relative to the land use component.
The land use component, yeah, Leclerc, tax assessor, plat Y3, lot 61.
A motion by Dr. O'Neill for completeness, seconded by Mr. Brady. All those in favor? Aye. 4-0, and the motion itself.
Yeah,
And
move the
if,
application.
excuse me, Joe,
Yeah.
just to remind you, if there's, if it's a negative, then you need to hit the granted relief and planning board review components that you think apply.
Right.
Okay?
Yep. Move the application be flourished, Leclerc, tax assessor, plat Y3, lot 61 negatively, with the staff's comments, recommendations, conditions, et cetera, and the standards which don't appear to be met. Standard 2, standard 3, standard 4A. The other materials, planning board review, number 1, compliance, compatibility, number 2, and number 16, available alternatives. And again, I would, again, comment that this is a self-inflicted hardship.
And you've affirmed all the staff's conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I saw it.
To deny.
Move to deny, yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me just clarify, if you're moving to deny, there would be no conditions.
There would be no
There would be, it would be based on.
I'm sorry, you're right, no conditions. It's just the issues of relief that Dr. O'Neill specified. Sorry.
And Mr. Chairman, can I confirm it's 2, 3, 4, and 16? Dr. O'Neill, did I miss one?
Correct.
Thank you.
I think, Jill, I believe
No,
the doctor referenced number 2, 3, and 4 under the
Variance.
standards to be met,
requested relief.
Well, the standards to be met.
and 1, 2, and 16.
And 1, 2, and 16.
Thank you, Doctor.
Along with the self-created hardship.
I'm sorry about that mix-up with the conditions, my apologies. Is there a second to that motion?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Right.
Aye. 4-0. Good luck at zoning. Okay. The last item on the agenda is just a informational. We have a meeting on the 27th. I asked Mike and Steve to overview all the legislation, just so we know what passed. Our game plan at that meeting going forward is to set up some subgroups of two board members, maybe 3 subgroups, to work on specific language, because staff has a huge job, and I include Mr. Marcel in that, has a huge job to propose all the language changes that would impact our ordinances as a result of this legislation to the planning board for recommendation, and then to the council for codification prior to January 1? January 1. So while we're sitting here hot, that's not that far away in terms of this kind of job. So I wanted to get this done as quickly as possible, just to give an overview so everybody can, and it won't be a long meeting. It'll just go through what the provisions of each law was, but then to break up into these subcommittees and to get this done. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, agreed. And for instance, even, it just occurred to me when Doc was going over those 1 through 16 criteria,
Yep.
some of those may be not applicable, now that the zoning
Yep.
criteria has changed. So there'll be some things that it'll be good to work through. It won't be as simple as, like the legislators
Changing
do.
language.
Just redlining it and putting.
As simple
new
as the
language.
wetland adjustments, right?
So we'll, I mean, and they're mandated, so there's not much discussion. I mean,
Right, so just to clarify, the 27th is not to drill down to the what-ifs of each of these laws. The 27th is to get an overview, and then the subcommittees are going
to
to work that
on-
language, and then we're all going to come back,
Because we're going to need to.
and the board's going to have to make a recommendation, and then it's going to go to the council,
Yeah,
and they're
we'll
going
have
to
to,
make a recommendation.
and staff and Mark, and we'll have to put it in
Yeah.
ordinance form and get it back to
This
you
is
guys.
not an easy gig at all. But more of it falls on those 3 or 4. Welcome, Ryan. Falls on those 4 than us, but so that's the game plan, guys. And we got a meeting the 27th, so. All right? Motion to adjourn? No, Joe has a question.
May I ask something? We have difference of opinion. When somebody pulls a building permit, they're going to do something with their home, is it the owner's responsibility or the builder's responsibility to pull the permit?
Owners.
It's the owner's responsibility. So the builder can go and get the,
Yeah.
yeah, as long as and it's posted, and we're in agreement, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But
yeah.
but the owner's liable.
The
okay.
owner is ultimately liable, okay.
Mark?
So, based on our emails, unless, and if it changes, I'll let you know, but I won't be available at 27th.
Okay, we're going to go,
So I assume I'm going to get the crappy stuff. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
let's make sure that we assign Mark to the least desirable stuff.
I just come visit Mike.
We're going to do that on the 27th.
Need a motion?
All right, we need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded, not debatable?
Motion